Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black, healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeleine Black, where I am interviewing incredible people that have overcome adversity in their life, and they haven't just bounced back in life, they have bounced forward. And today's guest is no exception. I've been watching videos, I've read her book and read loads of articles, and I'm super excited to interview her. So before we start, I will just read a quick bio about her. There's tons I could say about her, but that would take up the whole time. So I've shortened her bio. So Tracy Schmitt is my guest today. She's also known as Unstoppable Tracy. She is an expert on disarming limiting beliefs. She's been seen in Oprah magazines. Her videos have been viewed millions plus times. She's an international award-winning business leader. She's a speaker with the stars, a TEDx speaker. She's spoken in over 40 countries, has a BEd and an MBA. She's a decorated athlete as a World Cup sailor. She was the first amputee who climbed the Himalaya Mountains, a TV host, a best-selling author, and has been recognized for her international humanitarian work by the Canada Hall of Fame. So welcome, Tracy. It's delightful to have you here today. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Oh, it's over the moon to be unbreaking those stories with Madeleine, phenomenal superstar and kindred spirit energy.
So the first question I ask all of my guests is that what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Very powerful, and I think it's not so dissimilar to unstoppable.
Yeah.
Unbroken and unstoppable, we're both stopping those stories. I feel like the worst thing in the world is a good reason or a good excuse, right? And I can't begin to imagine what's going on in your life, in your listeners' lives. And so zero judgment. I know people are going through bankruptcy and living through unforgivable, painful relationship conversations and illness. And in their business world, things are going bankrupt. And so I can't begin to imagine what's going on behind our listeners' ears. But I know that the worst thing in the world is a good excuse.
Yeah.
And nobody would judge me as a four-way amputee. People would say, Tracy, you have a pretty good excuse when it comes to certain deliverables of what somebody would expect from me. But I know that if I live a life of no excuses, I get to live a life of no limits.
Absolutely.
Right? No excuses, no limits. And it's a bit of tough love. Yeah. But that's what I feel like Unbroken is.
Yeah,
I
and
feel
you really are limitless. I read your book just before our interview, and your mum never knew that you were going to be born a four-way quadriplegic. It was before the days of scans, and it was suggested to her that she should give you up for adoption. But clearly, your parents decided against that. Where has your unstoppable attitude come from?
Oh, I feel like I'm so lucky that I was born a four-way amputee. Because at 2 years old, you're not, like, I didn't choose it, right? And at 2 years old, you just want that cookie, for example. And so I was just unstoppable about getting the cookie. And so if that meant falling off a stool or trying and trying again. And so I learned that to do whatever it took to get the cookie, like every other kid, right? I'm no hero. I'm just a kid trying to steal a cookie when nobody's looking. But I got to learn that you do whatever it takes. And so then that's true in kindergarten when they say no, and that's true in skiing when they said no, and that's true in the corporate world when I'm being interviewed for jobs and they're saying, oh, you're the most inspirational person I ever met, but then they don't hire me, right? So I learned that I have to be unstoppable no matter what other people are thinking I can or can't do. And so I think I'm really lucky to have been born this way. And I think that that's a big part of becoming unstoppable. And it certainly helped having that Liverpudlian mother that you made reference to, that tough love, like, suck it up, buttercup, you got to make your bed.
Some people would find that statement really strange. I'm lucky to be born a four-way quadriplegic. They would struggle with that. It doesn't make sense to them. But I love the story that you tell in one of your videos about going to school. Your mum wanted you to go mainstream school, not a special needs school. And your head teacher said, well, we don't have a support teacher. She's got to be able to tie her own laces to get to school. Can you tell that story? Because it's just amazing, really.
Yeah. And just a little caveat, pelegia is like if you break a spine, and so you're a paraplegic or a quadriplegic.
Okay, my saying wrong.
And that's okay. That's no problem, right? And that's what it is about being an ally, is that when we make a mistake, we say, oops, and we're willing to pivot.
Correct.
So just out of respect quadruple amputee, meaning 4 limbs are missing. Okay. But pelegia means paralysis.
You know why? Because I've been speaking to another fantastic woman called Tasha, who I'm going to have on my show, and Tasha is a quadriplegic, so it's maybe because of that. She was paralyzed.
It overlaps. Yeah. It is no problem. It is no problem. And okay. So you're
a 4-way amputee, so then I don't get confused.
4-limb, 4-way amputee.
Yeah.
And it's so true that the headmaster, in Britain, you call it headmaster, in Canada, the principal, and in other schools, they call it the administrator, right? Wherever you are in the world, it's different. But he said no. And I thought that my mom was going to be all mama bear. Like, your listeners are the kind of souls that will be, what do you mean? They said no. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't angry. She just gave him eye contact, and she had these open arms, and with her kindest voice tone I have ever heard her use in my entire life, including at 5 years old. And she just said, how come? And like the magic of that question, how come? And so, because he wasn't defensive with her nice voice tone, he just explained, right? There's no assistance, there's no support worker, there's no educational helpers. So there's 30 kids, and the teacher would be all alone. So my mom, she replied, I totally understand. Mm-hmm. But then she didn't let that stop her. She counter offered, and she said, well, since we're here today, can we just try? And so
a trial period.
Yeah, just try. And so he agreed to try for the week. And we were so excited. We went around to the side of the building, and my mom looks out at the schoolyard, and then she gets this look of panic on her face. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but my mom drops to her knees in front of the whole school on cement. And what I don't realize, what she's doing is she's looking me eye to eye. And so she's on her knees, and she's holding my arm, that 5-finger super grip on the arms for the listeners. And she's holding my arms super tight, and she's looking me eye to eye on her knees. And she says, Tracy, it's really important that you and nobody's left behind.
Mm-hmm. Everyone included.
And I'm 5 years old. I have no idea why she's saying that, right? And so I nod my head vigorously, and I look up, and the principal was listening, and his eyes are all welled up with tears. So now, of course, he doesn't want to send me away on Friday, seeing my mom on her knees saying nobody left behind. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to recess, and he races outside to find me in the schoolyard, because if I'm in the schoolyard, I can stay. But if I'm not, I can't. And I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was nowhere to be found. So he runs inside to ask my teacher, couldn't Tracy tie her shoelaces? And my teacher's all confused. But she says, Tracy was the first one to tie her shoelaces. In fact, she tied 30 shoelaces. It turns out none of those kids could tie their shoelaces. And
we don't ask kids with arms and legs to be able to tie their laces to come to school, do we? Yeah.
How come the only girl with no hands was asked?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like your listeners, somebody writing a book or someone looking for a promotion, and whether you're a man or woman or black or white or tall or short or rich or poor, you know, or you've been a stay-at-home mom and you're re-entering the market, like whatever it is, we are all valuable contributors.
Absolutely.
Who knew that I was going to be the shoelace leader?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know your listeners are shoelace leaders. You are all valuable contributors because you are listening to Madeleine with the unbroken framing that you too are shoelace leaders.
And what I loved about your book, it obviously tells your story, but it's like part memoir and then part workbook. So you kind of show the lessons in your own personal life, and then you show how you've used them in the boardroom, how you've used them in your amazing sport career, how you've used them every day, and then how people can go ahead and question themselves and then see where they can make the changes. It's a very clever book.
You're very thoughtful. Thank you so much. It's true. You know, I spent a lot of time because of being such a visible disability, right? And they say, no, you can't ski, or no, you can't work here, or no, you can't swim, or no, you can't go to this school. So like, I'm always proving I can do it. I can do it.
That was the sense that I got. Is this about proving yourself?
Yeah. And I think my life was, right? Like up until 30s. Was unstoppable Tracy.
Yeah.
But when I was most successful was when I realized it wasn't about me, it was about unstoppable you, right? All the unstoppable listeners. And by sharing my story, people were empowered to take action.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be inspiration like perfume, where you put it on and you feel nice and you smell nice, but you jump in the shower and it washes away. Right? I would love it to be a sticking power where you feel unstoppable and take action, and you climb your own mountains and you sail in your own male dominated sport, right? Or business room.
Yeah, but you loved all of the sport. When did this sport love come from? Was it encouraged by your parents, or you just loved it?
So, and you know, what's really funny is in school, I wasn't even allowed to be in gym class, which makes no sense, right?
A decorated athlete.
And I'm a decorated athlete. Like, and here, this is so clearly, it's something that's in my soul. But the bonus out of that was that I got extra art. And I'm a bit of an artist too, because of all the extra art classes, right? And I have an art diploma as well as a recreation diploma and a master's in business, right? Like, it's so diverse. And so it helps. But so where did the sport come from? You know, being born a four-way amputee, I grew up in affordable housing. And so there are projects where, you know, because I had a disability, they gave me a try it day in sailing. And so my sister and nobody else on the street, they didn't get to try sailing. But because I was in affordable housing and because I had a disability, someone gave me this opportunity that I never got or would have got had I been born able-bodied. Like, my sister doesn't sail or ski, and she's fabulous soul. She had the same, you know, ruthless British Liverpudlian mother. We're both unstoppable in different ways, but my sport introduction came because people invited me as a person with a disability growing up in affordable housing. And so I got introduced to sailing and skiing because of it.
Straight away, the sailing, because I have tried sailing, and for me, with my hands, there were too many bits to hold on to. So I transferred to windsurfing with just one board to hold on to.
Woo! Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, but the sailing, I get capsized. I went round in circles. I, you know, got hit on the head by the boom. All of it. Yeah, boom bashed all the time. But you took to it literally like a duck to water.
I did. Well, I actually, much like you, I love water, but all of those things happened to me too. And because I'm top heavy with no legs, my legs end above my knees. Yeah, I kept falling out of the boat. Yeah. I spent all summer falling. I failed my first summer. And I think they thought I wasn't going to come back after the Try It program, because all the able-bodied kids, they all got their white sail level 1. And then I knew the parts of the boat and I knew the points of sail, but it turns out if you can't stay in the boat, you cannot pass your white sail level 1.
That's a bit tricky, I guess, if you can't stay in the boat, but it didn't stop you. You persevered and persevered.
Yes. And same with all of you in this pandemic and in life, right? When you're feeling broken, you just unstop that story and you keep climbing back in. And in fact,
it is, isn't it? Our self-limiting beliefs. It's what we tell ourselves, our mindset.
I love that, Madeleine. Yeah. It's what we tell ourselves. Yeah. It's so on the nose. And because I was falling out of the boat, I was forced to learn to look ahead, right? To see on the water, there's a turbulent patch. Dark water means wind. So then I learned to brace myself and I learned how to balance in the boat. And I learned to either steer around the windy patch that I would fall out of. Even better, I learned to brace and harness that wind and sail fast.
Yes, I have my middle daughter's a bit like you. She likes it, so she's leaning right up and her hair's practically in the water.
Get out. And so that's what turned me into a World Cup sailor, was because of falling out of the boat, right? I was forced to learn how to harness it.
There was that, but it was also you had lost your job and you decided to pack up and you went to America to train under this amazing guy, this teacher that you can tell us about, lived in your car pretty much for months on end and worked every day there until he finally took notice and saw your talents.
Yes, 3 months of living in my car, washing Magnus Ligidal, a gold Olympian, washing his boats for 3 months before he said, come on, let's go sailing. And Magnus is like you, Madeleine. Magnus was the only gold Olympian in all of North America. And so if I wanted to progress and stand out, right, I knew I had to surround myself with the best of the best. Right. So young girls that play basketball with the boys or younger children that play with older kids, Make-A-Wish Foundation. He played basketball with older kids where he lived. And so when he went to school and football, he was like grade 9 and he shouldn't have been on the football team, but because he'd always played with older kids where he lived, he was able to join the football team quicker. And so, when you hear stories like Madeleine's and mine and Make-A-Wish Foundation, it's usually people that surrounded themselves with successful others. So I love that your listeners get to have Unbroken with you, Madeleine.
Oh, thank you. But he really saw your talents, though, didn't he, for sailing? And he encouraged you after that. And
it took 3 months, but he eventually did.
And you raced with able-bodied men, and you captained tall ships.
Yes. He told me, Magnus said, well, your competitors are not going to give you the start line practice that you need to win. Said you got to be on some authentic start lines. And so through Magnus, I got in 135 able-bodied regattas around the world. Melbourne, Australia, 27 men and only 3 women. And I was one of them. And everybody had their hands and their legs. I was the only one with no hands and no legs. Can you imagine?
No, actually, I really can't. It's really hard for me to imagine how you managed to hold your own. But well, meeting you, I can imagine. But it's an amazing thing. It really is.
Yes. And if I can do it, you can do it. And it certainly wasn't on my radar. And the sole purpose of doing that was because I wanted to be in Rio and London, Olympics and Paralympics. And the truth of it is I never made it to London Olympics or Rio Olympics. And Tokyo 2020, as we all know, was canceled.
It's postponed at the moment,
Yeah. But what I did do was my relationship with Magnus, I ended up being a conduit between this gold Olympian who is kind of like Shrek, right? I'm kind of like Donkey, this enthusiastic, you can do it, you can save the village, right? And Magnus, who wants to be this secretive guy that nobody talks to because they all misunderstand his rough and gruff ways, right? But he ended up, Magnus and I ended up touching and helping and supporting every single boat in London 2012 and Rio 2016 for all the Olympic boats and all the Paralympic boats.
Mhm.
So my journey, although it didn't end with me in the Paralympics, ended up being bigger than me, right? It ended up being and approaching everybody. So it's like, you don't know what the end destination is. You don't know how,
You never know,
but you
absolutely.
jump in anyways.
And I guess it's about trusting, isn't it? Just going with the flow and being in your own flow, really. And you were in your own flow. You could have got caught in the disappointment of not being a Olympian, but yeah, they had bigger plans for you.
Yes. And there are disappointments, right? There is times like after Rio, I was devastated, but then I discovered the speaking world.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't, like, I avoided being visibly disabled. I spent all my life trying to only dating able-bodied men and working in the able-bodied world and going to able-bodied school, right? I didn't have any friends with disabilities until I started to train for the Paralympics.
Mm-hmm.
It was brand new world for me, being with other people with disabilities. And it was interesting, right? To go there and realizing even I had a bias against people with disabilities. So no wonder able-bodied people have an unconscious bias against people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And so
it's hard when you're a Paralympic athlete, because the variety of disabilities are huge. So I hear you call some people, compared to you, they just have like a paper cut. They've just got a foot missing. Oh, that's just a paper cut.
It's true. Even in the para world, the boat that I sail, they don't even classify the level of disability.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, you're legally disabled or not. So most of my para competition in the sailing are missing a thumb or paralyzed from the waist down, but they have big arms, or they're missing a foot. So it's true. I'm very cheeky and I say, oh, those are just paper cuts.
I love it. And how did you get to climb the Himalayas? That must have been, I was reading when you were talking about crossing that bridge. As a two-legged person, that would terrify me. Yeah. I don't know how you got over that.
I know, right? So, and it's funny, you know, because I could swim,
mm-hmm.
I could sail or fall out of a boat, and I could learn to sail. And because I learned to sail, I learned to teach sailing. And because I learned to teach sailing, I got into teachers college and got my Bachelor of Education. Yeah. And because I had a Bachelor of Education, I ended up traveling the world, Nepal, Uganda, Mexico, Jamaica, right? And so when I was in Nepal, and it was through a sailing instructor friend that I got to co-facilitate. I wasn't just a participant, I was a fellow leader on this trip in Nepal. And the Modai Kola River was beautiful river. It was 850 feet drop. And this suspension bridge had planks missing. Mm-hmm. And of course, the lines are for your waist. But with my legs off, those lines are well over my head. And
nothing to hold on to.
Nothing to hold on to left or right of me. And it's like Nepal. It is not a sophisticated bridge. So it is swinging in the breeze over this 850-foot drop with planks missing. Mm-hmm. And I'm on my little stumps. And so you can imagine, without knees, without legs, when I walk, there's a bit of a waddle. So you can imagine I was waddling the bridge too, right? Oh my gosh, it was so exhilarating. It was and when I got to the other side, there was this farmer who looked at me and he's like, if this one looks like that, what does the rest of the group look like? And he made me without my arms and legs. So I just do this incredible feat, and then I get slammed with this judgment, right? Again, of no, or a naysayer, or underestimated, like some of your listeners might feel.
But your friend at the back said something very funny though, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. I love that you know the book. I love it.
Yeah.
He said one of them doesn't have a head. And you know, in Nepal, stereotypes are real. There is not food, there isn't legislation, there aren't artificial legs, right? There aren't the easy canes and wheelchairs and adaptive technology.
Abandoned. They won't want to know them. Yeah.
No, they starve to death or they're put to death at birth,
Yeah.
right? Like they're just non-existent. So I saw very few people. I saw one person with a disability the whole time I was there, and he probably was going to be dead in a year.
Which is heartbreaking, isn't it? Because they then focus on all the things that you can't do rather than the things that you can do.
Yep. And then here this man, this Nepalese porter who had traveled with me for 9 days could get to a point where he made a joke. One of them doesn't have a head. So that's when I learned, you know, biases and judgment, and any workplace, get yourself submerged, get in the door. It doesn't matter that the principal said no. He just didn't KNOW. He just didn't know. And he never said no again. And that's the same with writing a book and working in a male dominated field or trying something new, right? That if in Nepal we could change opinions just by being together, where stereotypes are real, they're not stereotypes because of lack of equipment and legislation.
Absolutely.
Oh
Because
my
you
gosh,
say-
if we
you
could
say on
change
your-
opinion there.
on your website, you say it is not why, it is how we can do things.
Your people know why they want to do it.
Yeah.
People are stopped because they feel like, I just don't know how.
Yeah.
So they don't. They
So
think,
there's
oh, I'll
always- there's
Google
always
it,
a
or
how,
one day I
isn't there?
will.
There's always a way, there's always a how.
Yes.
Yeah.
We didn't know how I would ski. No hands, no legs. I couldn't use the sit ski, which is a typical adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did is we put my thighs, my stumps that end above my knees, in men's ski boots backwards.
Oh, backwards.
But we never would have figured that out on a couch at home.
Yeah.
You know, even though you don't know how, you just get started and you surround yourself by people that are successfully doing it already, right? I surrounded myself with great skiers, but none of them had ever done backwards ski boots. So I like to say, there's an industry expression, nothing about us without us.
Yes.
So you got to be involved in the solution. So yes, you surround yourself by ideas with Madeleine, for example, but then you need to take action and launch it and apply it the way it works for you. I needed to apply backwards ski boots. I was the only one that would figure that out for me, right? And so you got to find your backwards ski boots by getting started, even when you don't know how.
And even when you are faced with discrimination, I read in your book that you're going to a meeting and they're looking at you and you're not sure, they're judging you, you can sense it, you just look them straight in the eye and say, hi, I'm Tracy. And you're just so present and you're so grounded and they can't go anywhere with it.
No. You know, it's funny with the World Cup, Melbourne, Australia, when I had to charter a boat there because it was, $30,000 to fly a boat over, my boat over. So I chartered a boat. And while I had that boat and I was practicing, I put in this pool noodle and I put some duct tape on the boat in places because of no hands, no legs and competing with the able-bodied people. And the able-bodied people, 27 men, they boycotted me. And they said, this is a one-class design. And they said that those are adaptions. And one-class design means every boat's the same. And so I think I also remembered, like, they have been 24/7 to qualify for their trials. They've sacrificed relationships and jobs and time. So this was a very important race to them. And they don't want me cluttering up the start line and affecting their win. And so in my head, now when I tell the story, people think, oh, did that hurt your feelings? And you flew all that way and you spent all that money to Melbourne and now they're trying to stop you from participating. And actually, it would today, after this pandemic and being a little bit beat down and alone and so much reinvention, it would impact me today, I think. But that day, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it was just a fact. It's just a rule. So I pulled off the duct tape and I pulled off the pool noodle and I raced without it. I raced one class design. the same boat as they raced. Like I didn't take it to mean that they were subconsciously trying to secretly get me excommunicated from the race.
But
I was so
it was as
thick.
if you were trying to say you had the advantage over them.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make sense, does it?
No. No.
You proved them wrong anyway.
Yes, 7th in that race, one of the races.
Brilliant.
Out
And
of 30.
you have done amazing things, but I have to ask you, has one of the best things been a movie star in Robocop?
Isn't that fun?
That's very cool. When I read
Yes.
that, wow.
Wow. Yes, I was as close as you and I are on this Zoom screen with Michael Keaton.
It's amazing.
Which is so fun. And he had the same scene. He had to walk through a door, and my job was to walk past the door. And so we walked past each other for 7 hours.
Wow.
This 2-second scene I've got is
It doesn't matter. It's Robocop.
It's 2
cool.
seconds.
So cool. And we kind of touched briefly before that you have obviously now taken to the speaking world. Yes, it's a bit different at the moment. We're all Zooming, but you have shared the stage with kind of a lot of celebs, John Travolta, Mel Robb, loads of people. And you said in the beginning you weren't a speaker, but you realized that your story could impact on other people, and it wasn't about you, which I really understand.
That kindergarten story, I was in a pub, and you know how they do like open mic night, and it's usually music. Well, this particular open mic night was like a speaker slam, and friends said, you got to tell your story, you got to do this, you got to do this. And they coaxed me up on stage, and somebody with their cell phone recorded that kindergarten story. And then that kindergarten story went over 100 million views.
Wow.
And I didn't get a penny for it, no commercials. A lot of other people are making lots of money off of that because they're sharing it on their platforms. But 100 million views just for randomly being pushed up on a stage and saying yes. Sometimes opportunities are there and we say we're not ready yet, but you got to just do it, ready or not. And go for it.
That just say yes to everything. Obviously, not all the negative stuff, but say yes to everything, because it opens so many doors, doesn't it? One door can lead to another door, and you just never know where it all goes.
Mind blowing.
Start then of your speaking career.
Did that launch my speaking career?
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially, it definitely did. I had been to my coach was a week before, and so that certainly was a catalyst into me saying, okay, yes. Right. And take that opportunity, like you just coached everybody right now, say yes. And so somebody had done that for me, just like you just did. And I did it, and I took action. And so I would say that the coach was the one that launched the speaking career, and me saying yes was one of the variables. And then I wrote a book. I've got no hands. I have no interest in writing. It is very cumbersome process. Dragon, naturally speaking, is good, but it's not easy. There's lots of crazy typos. So you can imagine writing a book for me was exponentially challenging. Yeah. And yes, there's recording and ways around it. And that's certainly what I did. But my book was a bestseller before I even printed it. And there are ways that you can make it look like a bestseller, but my book was authentically a bestseller. In Canada, you sell more than 10,000 books, you are a bestseller with my publisher, Black Card Books.
And I recommend it to everyone. It's short and quick. You can read it literally in a few hours. I couldn't put it down, but it's got, I love the stories, but they're so relatable to everyday life. That is so neat how you've done it, like a little workbook. At the end of every chapter, you can just ask yourself questions, or you can think, actually, I do that already, I'm okay. So it can confirm as well, where you're at.
And repurpose if you're a coach or a supervisor or a parent, you can repurpose those questions at family dinner or at a team meeting or at a conference.
Yeah, it's great. So just before we end up, I can't believe the time has flown by so quickly.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I know. Do you have any tips, that you would part with other people to really what has helped you to stay unbroken, unstoppable, the amazing person that you are?
You are great too, like you, Madeleine, and all of your listeners. And so the 3 keys to the unstoppable, unbroken you from this podcast today was 1, exceed uncertainty. Like when you're falling out of your symbolic boat, get back in. Feeling uncertain's no excuse for inaction. Embrace possibility, even when you don't know how. You'll find your backwards boots if you don't avoid failure. And earn independence. But earning independence is not alone. Earning independence is surrounding yourself with the Madeleines and the gold Olympians and the successful, and then you make it happen. You take action. And so that's the 3 keys to the unstoppable, unbroken you is exceed uncertainty, embrace possibility, earn independence. And that's the limitless secret to unstoppable, unbroken you.
I could talk to you all day, Tracy. It's been such a joy and a delight. I'm just so grateful that we managed to get you on the show. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Oh, thank you for having me. Are you kidding?
Oh.
You are my unstoppable, earn independence, drive it up and keep it going. Perfume's washed off in the shower, so now it's reapplied with Madeleine.
Thank you.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black.